A shocking TV interview with a top WHO official indicates that Chinese officials put immense pressure on WHO investigators to stay away from the hypothesis that a lab leak could have been the cause of the COVID pandemic. The official said the WHO team was eventually forced to report that the hypothesis was extremely unlikely. Here are the details. The leader of the WHO mission, which reported that a Chinese lab leak was extremely unlikely to be the origin of the COVID pandemic, told a Danish TV station that the words extremely unlikely were only used because of intense pressure by the team's Chinese members. On Thursday, August 12th, Denmark's TV2 published Danish-language excerpts from the interview conducted for a documentary titled The Virus Mystery on its website, in which Danish scientist Peter Embarek spoke about how Chinese team members refused to discuss the hypothesis that the pandemic could have been the result of human error in a Chinese government lab. Embarek said horseshoe bats are not found in the wild in the Wuhan region, which points to the fact that patient 0 could very well have been a lab worker. Another point of concern that Embarek said needs to be investigated is the fact that a Chinese Center for Disease Control and Prevention lab moved to a new building only 500 meters from the market that was the epicenter of the pandemic in December of 2019. He said the lab moved on December 2nd, 2019. Embarek told TV2 such a move would involve the moving of virus samples in bats outside of secure rooms, which would have significantly increased the dangers of a lab leak. Embarek said his team did not get to look at laboratory books or documents directly from the laboratory. "We got a presentation," he said, "and then we asked the questions we wanted to ask, but we did not get to look at any documentation at all." He added that while the WHO's initial investigation was purely scientific, what is needed is a forensic-style investigation where books, logs, and records are checked and employees are interviewed separately. On July 16th, the WHO proposed to conduct such in-depth audits of the relevant laboratories in Wuhan. But at that time, China's Deputy Health Minister, Zheng Yixing, flatly rejected a new WHO visit. However, when asked for comment by the Washington Post, Embarek said the interview had been mistranslated in English-language media. He would not comment further and has since declined a follow-up interview with the Washington Post and could not be reached for comment by Reuters. You can read the interview in the link in the description below. Even as a deadly second wave of COVID-19 ravages India, doctors are now reporting a rash of cases involving a rare fungal infection, also called the black fungus, among recovering and recovered COVID-19 patients. The infection has a very high mortality rate, and treatment often involves the removal of an eye. Here are the details. The BBC reports that surgeons in India are reporting a sharp increase in the number of mucormycosis cases in patients who survived COVID-19. Mucormycosis is a rare fungal infection that is caused by exposure to mucor mold, which is commonly found in soil, plants, and even in the mucus of healthy people. It affects the sinuses, the brain, and the lungs, and can be life-threatening in diabetics or people with weakened immune systems. The infection has a frightening mortality rate of 50% and often requires the removal of an eye or sinus tissues. Diabetics who survive coronavirus are especially at risk. Some doctors believe that's because diabetes lowers the body's immune defenses, then coronavirus exacerbates the problem, and then steroids, which help fight coronavirus, acts like fuel to the fire. Steroids reduce inflammation in the lungs for COVID-19 and limit the damage, but they also reduce immunity in both diabetic and non-diabetic COVID-19 patients. It is thought that this drop in immunity could be triggering India's spike in mucormycosis cases. Mumbai's busy Sion Hospital has reported 24 cases of the fungal infection in the past 2 months, up from 6 cases a year. 11 of them had to lose an eye, and 6 of them died. Most of the patients are middle-aged diabetics who were struck down by the fungus 2 weeks after recovering from COVID-19. As the U.S. vaccination program stalls, the Delta variant is spreading fast through the country. Here's what you need to know. The number of new cases of COVID-19 in the U.S. has more than doubled in the last 2 weeks, according to the New York Times COVID tracker, with the Delta variant proving difficult to contain and a divide forming between those who are vaccinated and those who are not. As of July 14th, the 7-day average of daily cases in the country was 26,513, up from 12,540 on June 30th, with a notable hotspot emerging across Kansas, Oklahoma, Missouri, Arkansas, Louisiana, and Mississippi. These are states where vaccination rates are among the lowest in the U.S., with just 35% of people in Mississippi fully vaccinated, compared to 66.5% in Vermont, which has the highest vaccination rate in the country, according to the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. The effects of infections are also proving much more dangerous to the unvaccinated. While almost 50% of Americans have been fully vaccinated, Associated Press analysis of U.S. government data showed a 99% of deaths and hospitalizations from COVID in the last month involved those who were unvaccinated. The role of the Delta variant in causing many of these infections is now widely acknowledged. It made up to 57.6% of new infections in the U.S. between June 20th and July 3rd, according to U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Delta is defined by several mutations to its spike protein, including at position L452R. Several of these mutations make the body's immune responses less effective, and according to the Global Virus Network, its P681R mutation, directly beside the furin cleavage site, is key in enabling the virus to grip onto and invade human cells more effectively. This increased ability to replicate inside human airways can mean an individual is likely to shed more virus particles when infected, a virologist at Imperial College London told the Daily Telegraph. And the overall outcome of these adjustments to the virus is that the US is currently dealing with a variant that is up to 60% more transmissible than the Alpha variant, according to a modeling study cited by the Global Virus Network. Evidence shows vaccines remain effective against Delta, however. A Public Health England study on vaccine efficacy against the Delta variant found the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine 96% effective against hospitalization after 2 doses, with AstraZeneca 92% effective. Overall, it found Pfizer-BioNTech just 6% less effective than it is against the Alpha variant, and AstraZeneca just 1% less effective. That scientific reality leaves the race to vaccinate as the key story in the U.S. at this moment, with one professor in the Division of Infectious Diseases at Vanderbilt University Medical Center explaining to CNN that the more unvaccinated people there are, the more opportunities for the virus to multiply and mutate. Vaccination rates within the U.S. have dropped off in recent weeks, with average daily vaccinations falling from a peak of 3.4 million per day to around 417,000 as of July 9th, according to the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Currently, 48.3% of the U.S. population is fully vaccinated. However, there is also room for optimism as a result of the vaccinations administered so far. According to the New York Times COVID tracker, even with the recent spike, new infections in the U.S. are currently less than a tenth of the average daily rate at the height of the pandemic in January. Hospitalizations represent just a fraction of their winter peak, and deaths are near their lowest level since spring 2020. The U.S. is certainly in a better position than Indonesia, which set a daily case record of 54,517 on Wednesday, according to CNN, with 991 deaths. Similarly, Russia had 25,293 new cases and a record death toll of 791 on Thursday, according to the Moscow Times. While in China, local governments are moving aggressively to push residents to get vaccinated, and some are planning to bar them from accessing public venues if they refuse, according to MarketWatch. The global shipping industry is already exhausted by pandemic shocks that are adding to inflation pressures and delivery delays. However, the worst is still to come. When one of China's busiest ports announced it wouldn't accept new export containers in late May because of a COVID-19 outbreak, it was supposed to be up and running again in a few days. But as the partial shutdown drags on, it is worsening trade route bottlenecks and lifting record freight prices even higher. Here are the details. Bloomberg reports that the shipping backlog created when a ship got stuck sideways in the Suez Canal for a week in March is nothing compared to the backlog the global shipping industry is currently facing. The bottleneck is currently so severe that it costs companies more than $11,000 to ship a 12-meter container from Rotterdam to Shanghai. That's almost 7 times more than it would have cost a year ago. On top of that, it's looking like retailers won't be able to restock their warehouses for the crucial Christmas season in the US and Europe, which means there might not be much to buy for Christmas, and things might cost a lot more. The biggest problem is that many ports had to cut back on container handling functions due to COVID outbreaks. The worst case is currently in Yantian Port, which is one of China's busiest ports. Yantian Port now says it will be back to normal by the end of June, but even if that pans out, it may take months for the cargo backlog in southern China to clear, while the fallout ripples to ports worldwide. U.S. Federal Reserve policymakers raised their inflation forecast on Wednesday, June 16th, partly because shipping bottlenecks have formed and supply fails to keep pace with demand. So it seems that this Christmas would be a good time to enjoy being with our loved ones rather than obsessing about material things.
For more news animations and explainers, hit the subscribe and bell button to join the TomoNews family. Thanks for watching.